Sarah Martinez walked through the security checkpoint at Blacksite Operations Center with the same confidence she carried into every classified facility. The morning sun cast long shadows across the concrete compound as she presented her credentials to the guard. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her crisp uniform displayed the standard patches of a communications specialist. Nothing about her appearance suggested she was anything more than another military contractor reporting for duty. The facility buzzed with the usual morning activity. Analysts hurried between buildings carrying classified folders, while security personnel maintained their vigilant posts. Sarah had been assigned to this particular Blacksite for a routine communications upgrade project that was expected to last 3 weeks. The official paperwork listed her as a civilian contractor with appropriate clearance levels, and her background check showed a clean record with expertise in satellite communication systems. As she made her way to the main operations building, Sarah noticed the curious glances from other personnel. She was accustomed to being one of the few women in these male-dominated environments, but today felt different. The stares seemed more pointed, more judgmental than usual. She kept her expression neutral and continued toward her assigned workspace. The communications center occupied the 3rd floor of the main building, a sterile environment filled with banks of monitors, servers, and sophisticated radio equipment. Sarah's temporary supervisor, Lieutenant Colonel James Harrison, greeted her with a firm handshake and a professional smile. He appeared to be in his early 50s, with graying temples and the bearing of someone who had spent decades in military service. "Welcome to Blacksite 7, Harrison said, gesturing toward a workstation that had been prepared for her arrival. "Your reputation precedes you, Martinez. We're looking forward to getting these communication upgrades completed ahead of schedule." Sarah nodded and began setting up her equipment. The work was complex, but familiar territory for someone with her background. She had spent years developing expertise in secure communications protocols, and this particular upgrade involved integrating new encryption algorithms into the existing network infrastructure. During her first break, Sarah made her way to the facility cafeteria. The room felt noticeably quiet as she entered, and she could feel dozens of eyes following her movements. She selected a simple lunch and found an empty table near the windows. Before she could take her first bite, 3 male technicians approached her table with barely concealed smirks. "Mind if we join you?" asked the tallest one, whose name tag read Thompson. Without waiting for a response, all 3 men sat down at her table. "We couldn't help but notice that interesting artwork you've got there." Sarah glanced down at her left forearm, where a small portion of a tattoo was visible below her rolled-up sleeve. The design appeared to be nothing more than a stylized geometric pattern in black ink, the kind of tribal-inspired artwork that had become popular among young service members. She had been careful to keep most of it covered, but the summer heat had prompted her to roll up her sleeves during her morning work. "Just something I got when I was younger," Sarah replied casually, taking a bite of her sandwich. "You know how it is." Thompson exchanged glances with his companions before leaning back in his chair. "Yeah, we've all seen plenty of tattoos around here, but yours looks a little different. Kind of elaborate for just random tribal stuff." The second technician, whose name tag identified him as Rodriguez, chimed in with a mocking tone. "Maybe it's supposed to be some kind of warrior princess thing. You know, girl power and all that." Their laughter attracted attention from nearby tables, and Sarah could feel the weight of additional stares. She maintained her composure, understanding that her reaction in this moment could set the tone for her entire assignment at the facility. These men clearly saw her as an outsider, a civilian contractor who was trying too hard to fit into their world. "Everyone's entitled to their opinion," Sarah said diplomatically, finishing her lunch and preparing to leave. "I should get back to work." As she stood to clear her tray, Thompson called after her. "Hey, Martinez, maybe next time you should consider getting something more appropriate for a professional environment. Some of us take this job seriously." The comment stung, not because Sarah cared about these men's opinions, but because it represented the kind of casual disrespect she had encountered throughout her career. They saw her as just another civilian contractor, someone playing at being part of their world without truly understanding the sacrifices and commitment it required. Sarah returned to her workstation with renewed focus on her assignment. The communication upgrade was proceeding smoothly, and she found herself working late into the evening to stay ahead of schedule. The building grew quiet as the day's shift ended, and the Skeleton Night crew took over operations. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison stopped by her workstation around 8 o'clock to check on her progress. "Impressive work today, Martinez. You're moving faster than we anticipated." "Thank you, sir. I prefer to stay busy," Sarah replied, not looking up from her monitor where lines of code scrolled past at a rapid pace. "Just remember to pace yourself. This is a marathon, not a sprint," Harrison said. "And don't let the guys downstairs get under your skin. They'll come around once they see what you can do." Sarah nodded, appreciating his attempt at reassurance while wondering exactly how much he knew about the lunchtime incident. Word traveled fast in these small, isolated facilities, and she suspected that very little happened without the commanding officers becoming aware of it. As the week progressed, the pattern of subtle harassment continued. Snide comments about her appearance, jokes about civilian contractors thinking they were soldiers, and pointed references to her tattoo became regular occurrences. Sarah endured it all with professional grace, focusing on her work and maintaining the careful balance required to complete her assignment without incident. She had handled worse situations during her years of service, and she understood that her response to this treatment would be carefully observed and evaluated. Everything depended on maintaining her cover while completing the mission objectives that had brought her to this remote facility in the first place. The second week at Blacksite 7 brought new challenges that tested Sarah's patience and professionalism. The harassment had escalated from casual comments to deliberate attempts to undermine her work. Someone had been accessing her workstation after hours, moving files, and changing system configurations in ways that created hours of additional troubleshooting. Sarah documented each incident meticulously, knowing that her detailed records might prove valuable later. She also implemented several discrete security measures to protect her work, drawing on techniques that weren't typically known to civilian contractors. Her background in electronic warfare provided her with sophisticated countermeasures that her harassers couldn't detect or circumvent. Thompson and his crew had expanded their campaign of petty sabotage to include spreading rumors about her qualifications and competence. During one particularly frustrating morning, Sarah overheard Rodriguez telling a group of new arrivals that she had probably gotten her security clearance through political connections rather than merit. "These diversity hires are all the same," Rodriguez said loudly, clearly intending for Sarah to hear. "They show up with fancy degrees and big attitudes, but when it comes to real work, they're in over their heads." Sarah bit back her immediate response and continued working. Her actual qualifications would have impressed anyone in the facility, but her cover identity required her to appear as a competent but unremarkable communication specialist. The irony of being criticized for capabilities far below her actual skill level wasn't lost on her. The communication upgrade project was nearing completion ahead of schedule, despite the ongoing harassment. Sarah had worked 16-hour days to compensate for the sabotage attempts while maintaining the fiction that she was struggling with the complexity of the assignment. Her dedication hadn't gone unnoticed by Lieutenant Colonel Harrison, who began stopping by her workstation more frequently. "You're doing exceptional work under difficult circumstances," Harrison told her during one of his evening visits. "I want you to know that your professionalism hasn't gone unnoticed." Sarah appreciated his support, but she could sense that he was wrestling with something more significant than workplace harassment. His questions had become more probing over the past few days, and she suspected he was beginning to doubt the official story about her background and assignment. The breakthrough came unexpectedly on a Wednesday evening. Sarah was working late to complete the final phase of the communication system integration when alarms suddenly echoed throughout the facility. Red warning lights bathed the corridors in an ominous glow as personnel rushed to their emergency stations. Through her workstation monitors, Sarah could access the facility's security feeds and situation reports. A coordinated attack was underway at multiple points around the perimeter. Armed insurgents had penetrated the outer defenses and were advancing toward the main compound using sophisticated tactics that suggested extensive planning and inside knowledge of the facility's layout. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison burst into the communications center with 2 armed guards. "Martinez, we need to evacuate this area immediately. The main server room has been compromised, and we're operating on backup systems." Sarah's training kicked in automatically. Instead of following evacuation procedures, she began implementing emergency communication protocols that weren't part of her official assignment. Her fingers moved across multiple keyboards simultaneously as she established secure channels with outside command authorities and coordinated defensive responses. "What are you doing?" Harrison demanded. "I told you to evacuate." "Sir, with respect, someone needs to maintain communication links during the crisis," Sarah replied without looking away from her screens. "I can keep these systems operational from here." Before Harrison could respond, incoming fire shattered the windows overlooking the courtyard. The attackers had reached the main building and were attempting to disable the facility's communication capabilities. Sarah's workstation became the critical link between the besieged facility and potential reinforcements. Thompson and Rodriguez appeared in the doorway, armed and wearing tactical gear that suggested they were more than simple technicians. "Colonel, we need to move now. They're pushing toward the server room." Sarah continued working, her actions becoming more decisive and professional with each passing moment. She was coordinating defensive positions, calling in air support, and managing intelligence feeds with the efficiency of someone who had done this many times before. Her supposed limitations as a civilian contractor were evaporating under the pressure of real combat. "Martinez, where did you learn those procedures?" Harrison asked, suspicion replacing his earlier concern for her safety. "Standard emergency protocols, sir," Sarah replied, but her explanation sounded increasingly hollow as she demonstrated capabilities that extended far beyond civilian contractor training. The attackers reached the 3rd floor, and the sound of gunfire echoed through the corridors outside the communications center. Sarah made a decision that would expose her true identity, but potentially save lives. She activated a hidden communication array that had been built into her workstation and began transmitting on frequencies that were reserved for the most classified military operations. "Ghost Hawk Control. This is Raven 7 requesting immediate tactical support at grid reference Delta 7 Alpha." Sarah spoke into a specialized headset that she retrieved from a concealed compartment in her equipment case. "We have hostile forces inside the perimeter and need close air support within 15 minutes. Harrison stared at her in shock. "Those are special operations frequencies. How do you have access to that network?" Sarah continued coordinating the defense, while simultaneously uploading critical data from the facility's servers to secure cloud storage. Her movements were precise and practiced, revealing years of advanced training in combat communications and electronic warfare. "Raven 7, this is Ghost Hawk Control," came the response through her headset. "Tactical support is en route. What's your current operational status?" "Facility compromised, but holding. Recommend immediate extraction for essential personnel and complete data recovery protocols," Sarah replied with the calm professionalism of someone accustomed to combat situations. Thompson and Rodriguez were now staring at her with expressions of confusion and growing respect. The woman they had been mocking and harassing was demonstrating capabilities that exceeded those of most military professionals they had encountered. The sound of approaching helicopters grew louder as Sarah completed her data transfer and began implementing facility lockdown procedures. She was systematically denying the attackers access to sensitive information while ensuring that friendly forces would have everything they needed to mount an effective counterattack. "Martinez, I need to know who you really are," Harrison said firmly. Those aren't civilian contractor skills. Sarah looked up from her workstation for the first time since the attack began. Her expression had hardened into the focused determination of a combat veteran, and the pretense of being an ordinary technician had completely fallen away. "Sir, my real identity is classified above your clearance level," she said calmly. "But I can tell you that the communication upgrade was secondary to my actual mission here." The implications of her statement settled over the room as the first helicopters touched down in the courtyard outside. Special operations personnel were fast roping from the aircraft and moving to secure the facility with a level of coordination that suggested they had been prepared for this exact scenario. Sarah stood and revealed more of her tattoo by rolling up her sleeve completely. What had appeared to be simple geometric patterns was actually an intricate design that incorporated specific symbols and codes. To trained eyes, it would be immediately recognizable as the mark of an elite unit that officially didn't exist. The silence in the communication center was broken only by the distant sounds of helicopters and tactical teams securing the facility. Thompson and Rodriguez stared at Sarah's fully exposed tattoo with growing recognition and dawning horror at their treatment of her over the past 2 weeks. The tattoo was far more complex than anyone had realized. What appeared to be decorative geometric patterns actually contained encoded information that identified Sarah as a member of the Strategic Operations Group, an elite unit that operated under the deepest levels of classification. The specific symbols woven throughout the design indicated her rank as a senior operative with authorization for autonomous mission command. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison was the first to fully comprehend the implications. "Strategic Operations Group," he said quietly, his voice carrying a mixture of respect and concern. "I should have been briefed if SOG was conducting operations at my facility." Sarah was already packing her specialized equipment, her civilian contractor facade completely abandoned. "Sir, the briefing you received was accurate. I am a communication specialist, and I did complete the system upgrade. Those objectives were genuine, but secondary to intelligence gathering regarding security vulnerabilities at this facility." The irony was lost on no one in the room. While Thompson and Rodriguez had been harassing Sarah for her supposed inadequacy, she had been systematically evaluating every aspect of the facility's defenses and personnel. Her real mission had been to identify the security weaknesses that had just been exploited so effectively by the attacking force. "The attack tonight wasn't random," Sarah continued, securing classified equipment in a specially designed case. "Someone with detailed knowledge of this facility's procedures and layout coordinated this assault. My investigation over the past 2 weeks identified several concerning patterns in communication logs and access records." Thompson found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "We've been giving grief to a SOG operative for 2 weeks." Sarah looked at him directly for the first time since the crisis began. "Your behavior provided valuable intelligence about facility culture and security awareness. Personal harassment often correlates with lapses in operational security, and this facility demonstrated both problems extensively. The tactical teams outside had secured the immediate area, and the sound of gunfire had diminished to sporadic exchanges as the attackers were systematically eliminated or captured. Sarah's early warning and coordination had allowed defensive forces to respond effectively, preventing what could have been a catastrophic intelligence breach." Rodriguez stepped forward hesitantly. "Ma'am, I need to apologize for our conduct. We had no idea. Your ignorance of my identity was intentional and necessary for operational security," Sarah replied matter-of-factly. "However, your treatment of someone you believe to be a civilian contractor reflects poorly on your professionalism and the facility's leadership." Lieutenant Colonel Harrison intervened before the situation could escalate further. "Martinez, I need a complete briefing on your findings and recommendations. This attack suggests security compromises that extend beyond simple tactical intelligence." Sarah nodded and activated her secure communication equipment. "Sir, I've been documenting security vulnerabilities throughout my assignment. The primary concern is that several personnel have access to information above their classification level, and there are patterns in communication traffic that suggest potential insider collaboration with hostile forces. The implications sent a chill through everyone in the room. Blacksite 7 housed some of the military's most sensitive intelligence operations, and a security breach at this level could compromise ongoing missions worldwide. Sarah's investigation had uncovered evidence of systematic security failures that went far beyond simple procedural lapses. The attack tonight was precisely timed to target our communication upgrades, Sarah explained, pulling up data on her secure tablet. The attackers knew exactly when the systems would be most vulnerable during the integration process. That information was only available to a small number of personnel within this facility. Harrison's expression darkened as he considered the ramifications. You're suggesting we have a mole. I'm stating that someone with authorized access has been sharing classified information with hostile forces, Sarah corrected. My analysis indicates at least 3 separate occasions over the past month when sensitive operational details were transmitted outside normal channels shortly before related security incidents at other facilities. The tactical teams had completed their sweep of the facility, and a SOG commander entered the communications center. Major Patricia Hayes was a compact woman in her late 30s with the bearing of someone accustomed to command in high-stress situations. She surveyed the room quickly before addressing Sarah directly. Raven 7, status report. Facility secured, primary mission objectives completed, security compromises confirmed, Sarah replied with crisp efficiency. Recommend immediate counterintelligence investigation and personnel security review for all assigned staff. Major Hayes turned to Lieutenant Colonel Harrison. Colonel, I need to inform you that this facility is now under SOG authority pending completion of our investigation. All personnel will be interviewed, and access to sensitive areas will be restricted until we can identify the source of the security breach. Harrison nodded grimly. Understood, Major. My staff will provide complete cooperation with your investigation. Thompson and Rodriguez exchanged worried glances. They were beginning to understand that their harassment of Sarah might be viewed as part of a pattern of security lapses that had enabled the evening's attack. Their behavior had demonstrated exactly the kind of casual disregard for protocol and professional standards that created opportunities for hostile intelligence operations. Sarah began preparing her final report, documenting not only the technical aspects of her investigation, but also the cultural and procedural issues she had observed. The facility's tolerance for harassment and unprofessional behavior had created an environment where serious security violations could occur without detection. Ma'am, Thompson said, addressing Sarah with the formal respect that should have been shown from the beginning. Will our conduct be included in your report? Sarah looked up from her work. Every aspect of facility operations is relevant to security assessment. Your behavior towards someone you believe to be a civilian contractor demonstrates attitudes that could be exploited by hostile intelligence services. The full weight of their actions was beginning to settle on Thompson and Rodriguez. They had not only harassed a senior special operations officer, but had done so in ways that revealed their own unprofessional attitudes and potential security vulnerabilities. Their mockery of her tattoo had ironically drawn attention to the very symbol that identified her as one of the military's most elite operatives. Major Hayes reviewed Sarah's preliminary findings with growing concern. Raven 7, your investigation has identified security compromises that extend beyond this facility. We're implementing immediate containment protocols for all related operations. Sarah completed her equipment shutdown and stood to address Lieutenant Colonel Harrison directly. Sir, my formal report will include specific recommendations for improving security protocols and personnel standards. The communication system upgrades have been completed successfully and include enhanced monitoring capabilities that will help prevent similar breaches in the future. The events of the evening had transformed the dynamics within the facility completely. Personnel who had dismissed Sarah As an unqualified civilian contractor now understood, they had been observed and evaluated by someone with the authority to impact their careers and security clearances. The attack that had threatened the facility's security had been repelled largely due to the early warning and coordination provided by the woman they had been mocking for her appearance and perceived inadequacy. As SOG personnel prepared to transport critical equipment and personnel to secure locations, Sarah took one final look around the communication center where she had endured 2 weeks of harassment while gathering intelligence that had potentially saved lives and prevented a major security disaster. The geometric patterns of her tattoo caught the light as she gathered her personal effects, each symbol representing years of service and sacrifices that Thompson and Rodriguez were only beginning to appreciate. The investigation that followed the attack at Blacksite 7 revealed the full scope of the security compromise that Sarah's mission had uncovered. Over the next 72 hours, SOG teams conducted intensive interviews with every person who had access to the facility during the previous 3 months. The results were more disturbing than anyone had initially suspected. Sarah worked alongside Major Hayes and a team of counterintelligence specialists to analyze communication logs, access records, and personnel files. Her detailed observations from 2 weeks of undercover work provided crucial context for understanding how security protocols had been systematically circumvented. The harassment she had endured, while personally unpleasant, had revealed cultural problems that created opportunities for hostile intelligence operations. The breach wasn't the result of sophisticated hacking or technical infiltration, Sarah explained during a classified briefing attended by senior military officials via secure video conference. Someone with legitimate access was deliberately sharing information with outside parties, and the facility's casual attitude toward security protocols enabled this activity to continue undetected. Thompson and Rodriguez found themselves at the center of the investigation, not because they were suspected of espionage, but because their behavior exemplified the unprofessional atmosphere that had made the security breach possible. Their harassment of Sarah had demonstrated exactly the kind of casual disregard for protocol and authority that hostile intelligence services could exploit. During their individual interviews with SOG investigators, both men provided detailed accounts of their interactions with Sarah and their observations of other personnel during her assignment. Their testimonies, while embarrassing, helped establish a timeline of events and revealed additional security concerns that might otherwise have remained hidden. "We thought she was just another contractor trying to fit in," Rodriguez admitted during his interview. "The way she kept her tattoo mostly covered, the way she didn't push back when we gave her grief about it. We figured she was embarrassed about getting something inappropriate for a professional environment." The investigator, a seasoned SOG captain named David Chun, made careful notes while maintaining a neutral expression. "Did it occur to you that someone might keep identifying marks covered for operational security reasons?" Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "No, sir. We just assumed she was trying to look more professional than she really was." Thompson's interview revealed similar assumptions and highlighted how Sarah's cover identity had been carefully constructed to appear slightly inappropriate for the military environment. Her visible tattoo, designed to look like impulsive body art chosen by a young civilian, had actually served as both camouflage and a test of facility personnel attitudes. The geometric patterns were visible enough to attract attention and commentary, Captain Chun explained to Lieutenant Colonel Harrison during a briefing session. Operative Martinez deliberately invited exactly the kind of harassment she received in order to observe how facility personnel would respond to someone they perceived as inferior or inappropriate. Harrison reviewed Sarah's detailed reports with growing appreciation for the sophistication of her mission. Every aspect of her assignment had been designed to test different elements of facility security, from technical systems to human factors. The communication upgrade project had provided legitimate cover while giving her access to every critical system and area within the compound. Her analysis identified 17 separate security vulnerabilities, ranging from inadequate access controls to cultural problems that could be exploited by hostile intelligence services, Harrison read from the classified summary. The attack that occurred during her final week was enabled by information that could only have been obtained through insider access to our operational planning. The investigation culminated when counterintelligence specialists identified Staff Sergeant Michael Torres as the source of the security breach. Torres had been gradually providing operational details to contacts he believed were part of a legitimate intelligence sharing arrangement with Allied forces. In reality, he had been carefully manipulated by a sophisticated foreign intelligence operation that had been targeting multiple military facilities. Sarah participated in Torres' interrogation, her undercover observations providing crucial context for understanding how he had been recruited and managed by his foreign handlers. His cooperation with hostile forces hadn't been motivated by ideology or money, but by carefully constructed deception that made him believe he was supporting authorized intelligence operations. Torres genuinely believed he was following orders from higher authority, Sarah explained during the post-investigation briefing. His handlers had convinced him that certain information sharing was authorized under classified programs that he wasn't fully briefed on. It's a sophisticated recruitment technique that exploits the compartmentalized nature of military intelligence work. The revelation that Torres had been unknowingly working for foreign intelligence added another layer of complexity to the security review. His access to operational planning had enabled the coordinated attack on the facility, and his information had potentially compromised other ongoing operations. The damage assessment would require weeks of additional investigation and analysis. Thompson and Rodriguez received formal reprimands for their unprofessional conduct, but their cooperation with the investigation and genuine remorse for their behavior helped mitigate more serious consequences. They participated in additional security training that emphasized the importance of maintaining professional standards regardless of personal opinions about colleagues or contractors. The harassment you directed toward Operative Martinez reflected poorly on your professionalism and created an environment where actual security violations could occur undetected. Major Hayes informed them during their disciplinary hearing. Your behavior demonstrated exactly the kind of casual disregard for protocol that hostile intelligence services look for when recruiting potential assets. Sarah completed her mission report with recommendations that extended far beyond the technical aspects of communication security. Her analysis addressed cultural issues, training deficiencies, and procedural gaps that had enabled both the harassment she experienced and the more serious security breaches that had been occurring simultaneously. Facilities operating under high security classifications must maintain professional standards that reflect the sensitivity of their missions, she wrote in her summary recommendations. Tolerance for harassment, unprofessional behavior, or casual disregard for protocol creates vulnerabilities that can be exploited by sophisticated adversaries. The broader implications of Sarah's investigation extended to dozens of similar facilities worldwide. Her methodology for combining technical security assessment with cultural evaluation became a model for future counterintelligence operations. The harassment she had endured, while unpleasant, had provided valuable intelligence about systemic problems within the military's most sensitive installations. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison implemented immediate changes to facility protocols based on Sarah's recommendations. Mandatory training sessions addressed both technical security procedures and professional conduct standards, with particular emphasis on the security implications of harassment and unprofessional behavior. What happened here demonstrates that security isn't just about technical systems and access controls, Harrison explained to his staff during a facility-wide briefing. The way we treat our colleagues and contractors reflects our overall commitment to the mission and our vulnerability to hostile intelligence operations. Sarah's final days at Blacksite 7 were markedly different from her first 2 weeks. Personnel who had previously dismissed or harassed her now treated her with the professional respect that should have been shown from the beginning. The change in atmosphere was dramatic, but it had come at the cost of a serious security breach and potential loss of life. As she prepared to depart for her next assignment, Sarah reflected on the complex dynamics that had shaped her mission. The geometric patterns of her tattoo, which had attracted so much negative attention, were actually a testament to years of service in the military's most demanding roles. Each symbol represented specific operations and achievements that few people were clear to understand. The irony wasn't lost on her that people had mocked the very symbol that identified her as one of their most experienced and capable colleagues. Her success in maintaining operational security while enduring personal harassment had demonstrated both her professional competence and the security vulnerabilities that such behavior could create. 6 months after the events at Blacksite 7, Sarah Martinez stood before a classified military tribunal reviewing the aftermath of her investigation and its broader implications for military security protocols. The geometric patterns of her tattoo were now fully visible on her dress uniform, each symbol officially recognized as representing distinguished service in operations that remained classified at the highest levels. The tribunal consisted of senior military officials from multiple branches and intelligence agencies, all holding security clearances sufficient to review the complete details of her mission and its consequences. Major Hayes sat at the witness table beside Sarah, prepared to provide testimony about the investigation's findings and their implementation across similar facilities worldwide. Operative Martinez, the tribunal chairman, began. Your report for Blacksite 7 identified security vulnerabilities that have been confirmed at 17 other classified installations. Can you explain how harassment and unprofessional behavior create opportunities for hostile intelligence operations? Sarah stood and activated a secure presentation system that displayed her analysis in carefully redacted form. Sir, harassment creates an environment where normal security protocols are viewed as optional rather than mandatory. When personnel feel empowered to ignore professional standards in their treatment of colleagues, they're more likely to develop casual attitudes toward other aspects of security protocol. The presentation showed correlation analysis between facilities that had experienced security breaches and those with documented patterns of unprofessional behavior. The statistical relationships were clear and disturbing, indicating that cultural problems were reliable predictors of more serious security vulnerabilities. Additionally, Sarah continued, harassment often targets personnel who are perceived as different or outsiders, which can include individuals working undercover assignments. This creates operational security risks and can compromise legitimate intelligence activities. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison appeared via secure video link to provide his perspective on the changes implemented at Blacksite 7 following Sarah's recommendations. His facility had become a model for integrating security protocols with professional conduct standards, and the improvements have been documented through subsequent evaluations. The cultural transformation at our facility has been remarkable, Harrison testified. Personnel now understand that professional respect isn't just about courtesy, but about operational security and mission effectiveness. The harassment that Operative Martinez endured would be immediately reported and addressed under our current protocols. Thompson and Rodriguez also provided testimony, describing how their participation in mandatory training had changed their understanding of security responsibilities. Their experience had become part of educational programs implemented at facilities worldwide, demonstrating the connection between personal conduct and national security. We thought we were just giving grief to a contractor who was trying too hard to fit in, Thompson admitted during his testimony. We didn't understand that our behavior was being evaluated as part of a security assessment, or that it reflected broader problems with facility culture that could be exploited by hostile forces. The tribunal reviewed classified documentation showing how Sarah's methodology had been adapted for use at other sensitive installations. Her technique of combining technical security assessment with cultural evaluation had identified previously undetected vulnerabilities at facilities that had passed conventional security reviews. The Strategic Operations Group has implemented Operative Martinez's assessment protocols at 43 classified installations, Major Hayes reported. These evaluations have identified security improvements that have prevented an estimated 12 potential breaches over the past 6 months. Sarah's tattoo had become something of a symbol within SOG circles, representing the importance of operational security and the recognition that effective intelligence work often required enduring personal discomfort for mission success. The geometric patterns that had once attracted mockery were now understood by informed personnel as marking someone with extraordinary qualifications and achievements. The tribunal chairman reviewed the classified summary of Sarah's career accomplishments, which included operations in hostile territories where her cover identities had been maintained under far more dangerous circumstances than workplace harassment. Her ability to complete missions while enduring various forms of stress had made her particularly valuable for assignments requiring deep cover infiltration. Operative Martinez, he said, "Your mission at Blacksite 7 has resulted in security improvements that extend far beyond that single facility. The correlation between professional conduct and operational security that you identified has become a foundational principle for facility management across multiple commands." The investigation's findings had also led to the identification and prosecution of foreign intelligence networks that had been operating against military installations for several years. Staff Sergeant Torres' cooperation with the counterintelligence investigation had provided crucial information that enabled the disruption of hostile operations targeting dozens of sensitive facilities. Sarah's detailed observations of facility culture and personnel behavior had proven as valuable as her technical security analysis. Her ability to maintain operational effectiveness while being subjected to harassment had demonstrated both her professional competence and the security risks created by tolerating unprofessional conduct. The harassment directed toward me was personally unpleasant but operationally valuable, Sarah explained to the tribunal. It revealed attitudes and behaviors that could be exploited by sophisticated adversaries, and it provided insight into how facility personnel would respond to stress or pressure from outside sources. Major Hayes presented evidence showing how the security improvements implemented based on Sarah's recommendations had created measurable improvements in overall facility effectiveness. Personnel were more likely to report suspicious behavior, more careful about following established protocols, and more conscious of the security implications of their daily actions. The tribunal's final session addressed the broader implications of Sarah's work for military culture and operational security. Her experience had demonstrated that technical security measures were insufficient without corresponding attention to human factors and organizational culture. Effective security requires an environment where all personnel understand their role in protecting sensitive information and operations, the tribunal chairman concluded. The harassment that Operative Martinez endured at Blacksite 7 was not only inappropriate, but also created security vulnerabilities that could have resulted in catastrophic intelligence breaches. Sarah received formal recognition for her service, including commendations that acknowledged both her technical expertise and her ability to maintain operational security under difficult personal circumstances. The geometric patterns of her tattoo were officially documented as representing service in operations that had protected national security interests under some of the most challenging conditions imaginable. 6 months later, Thompson contacted Sarah through official channels to request permission to share his experience as part of a training presentation he was developing for new facility personnel. He had become an advocate for professional conduct standards and wanted to use his own mistakes as examples of how casual harassment could compromise security. "Ma'am, I realize now that we weren't just being jerks to a contractor," he wrote in his formal request. "We were demonstrating exactly the kind of security blindness that hostile intelligence services look for when they're trying to identify facilities vulnerable to penetration." Sarah approved his request, understanding that education based on real examples was often more effective than abstract training materials. Thompson's willingness to acknowledge his mistakes and learn from them represented the kind of cultural change that her mission had been designed to encourage. The tattoo that had once made her a target for harassment had become a symbol of the dedication and sacrifice required for effective intelligence work. Each geometric pattern represented not just specific operations and achievements, but also the personal costs of maintaining cover identities and operational security under circumstances that few people could fully understand or appreciate. Years later, Sarah's methodology for assessing facility security through cultural evaluation became standard practice throughout the intelligence community. Her experience at Blacksite 7 had demonstrated that the most sophisticated technical security measures could be undermined by simple human failings like harassment, unprofessional conduct, and casual disregard for the principles that effective security required. The geometric patterns on her arm continued to mark her as someone who had served in the shadows, protecting national security through missions that would never be fully acknowledged or understood by the public. But for those with the clearance and experience to recognize the symbols, they represented a level of service and sacrifice that commanded the highest respect and professional recognition. Sarah Martinez walked through the security checkpoint at Blacksite Operations Center with the same confidence she carried into every classified facility. The morning sun cast long shadows across the concrete compound as she presented her credentials to the guard. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her crisp uniform displayed the standard patches of a communications specialist. Nothing about her appearance suggested she was anything more than another military contractor reporting for duty. The facility buzzed with the usual morning activity. Analysts hurried between buildings carrying classified folders, while security personnel maintained their vigilant posts. Sarah had been assigned to this particular Blacksite for a routine communications upgrade project that was expected to last 3 weeks. The official paperwork listed her as a civilian contractor with appropriate clearance levels, and her background check showed a clean record with expertise in satellite communication systems. As she made her way to the main operations building, Sarah noticed the curious glances from other personnel. She was accustomed to being one of the few women in these male-dominated environments, but today felt different. The stare seemed more pointed, more judgmental than usual. She kept her expression neutral and continued toward her assigned workspace. The communications center occupied the 3rd floor of the main building, a sterile environment filled with banks of monitors, servers, and sophisticated radio equipment. Sarah's temporary supervisor, Lieutenant Colonel James Harrison, greeted her with a firm handshake and a professional smile. He appeared to be in his early 50s, with graying temples and the bearing of someone who had spent decades in military service. "Welcome to Blacksite 7, Harrison said, gesturing toward a workstation that had been prepared for her arrival. "Your reputation precedes you, Martinez. We're looking forward to getting these communication upgrades completed ahead of schedule." Sarah nodded and began setting up her equipment. The work was complex, but familiar territory for someone with her background. She had spent years developing expertise in secure communications protocols, and this particular upgrade involved integrating new encryption algorithms into the existing network infrastructure. During her first break, Sarah made her way to the facility cafeteria. The room felt noticeably quiet as she entered, and she could feel dozens of eyes following her movements. She selected a simple lunch and found an empty table near the windows. Before she could take her first bite, 3 male technicians approached her table with barely concealed smirks. "Mind if we join you?" asked the tallest one, whose name tag read Thompson. Without waiting for a response, all 3 men sat down at her table. "We couldn't help but notice that interesting artwork you've got there." Sarah glanced down at her left forearm, where a small portion of a tattoo was visible below her rolled-up sleeve. The design appeared to be nothing more than a stylized geometric pattern in black ink, the kind of tribal-inspired artwork that had become popular among young service members. She had been careful to keep most of it covered, but the summer heat had prompted her to roll up her sleeves during her morning work. "Just something I got when I was younger," Sarah replied casually, taking a bite of her sandwich. "You know how it is." Thompson exchanged glances with his companions before leaning back in his chair. "Yeah, we've all seen plenty of tattoos around here. But Yours looks a little different. Kind of elaborate for just random tribal stuff. The second technician, whose name tag identified him as Rodriguez, chimed in with a mocking tone. Maybe it's supposed to be some kind of warrior princess thing. You know, girl power and all that. Their laughter attracted attention from nearby tables, and Sarah could feel the weight of additional stares. She maintained her composure, understanding that her reaction in this moment could set the tone for her entire assignment at the facility. These men clearly saw her as an outsider, a civilian contractor who was trying too hard to fit into their world. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, Sarah said diplomatically, finishing her lunch and preparing to leave. I should get back to work. As she stood to clear her tray, Thompson called after her. Hey, Martinez, maybe next time you should consider getting something more appropriate for a professional environment. Some of us take this job seriously. The comment stung, not because Sarah cared about these men's opinions, but because it represented the kind of casual disrespect she had encountered throughout her career. They saw her as just another civilian contractor, someone playing at being part of their world without truly understanding the sacrifices and commitment it required. Sarah returned to her workstation with renewed focus on her assignment. The communication upgrade was proceeding smoothly, and she found herself working late into the evening to stay ahead of schedule. The building grew quiet as the day's shift ended and the Skeleton Night crew took over operations. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison stopped by her workstation around 8 o'clock to check on her progress. Impressive work today, Martinez. You're moving faster than we anticipated. Thank you, sir. I prefer to stay busy, Sarah replied, not looking up from her monitor where lines of code scrolled past at a rapid pace. Just remember to pace yourself. This is a marathon, not a sprint, Harrison said. And don't let the guys downstairs get under your skin. They'll come around once they see what you can do. Sarah nodded, appreciating his attempt at reassurance while wondering exactly how much he knew about the lunchtime incident. Word traveled fast in these small, isolated facilities, and she suspected that very little happened without the commanding officers becoming aware of it. As the week progressed, the pattern of subtle harassment continued. Snide comments about her appearance, jokes about civilian contractors thinking they were soldiers, and pointed references to her tattoo became regular occurrences. Sarah endured it all with professional grace, focusing on her work and maintaining the careful balance required to complete her assignment without incident. She had handled worse situations during her years of service, and she understood that her response to this treatment would be carefully observed and evaluated. Everything depended on maintaining her cover while completing the mission objectives that had brought her to this remote facility in the first place.